Okay, we are recording now. It is the end of March 2023 in another storm coming through northern Nevada. What I've decided to do is record this because there's a couple people that can't make it to today's class. As I shared with some of the other folks that I'm down to 3 questions for the midterm. The midterm now will be in 2 weeks. So make sure everything's up to speed in 2 weeks from now. And what I will do is at about 3:45 to 3:50 in 2 weeks from now, I will email you the questions. I would like them to be 2 questions because that's enough. And I want these questions will be how well you've not only studied the specifics, but how well you've integrated all the information. So they will be application questions. So I'm down to 3 now, and I'm going to, as I'm recording this one, I will post it on my YouTube channel, and I will give you all that information for people who want to do view this again. Next week, then, we will be meeting in class come hell or high water. And what we'll be doing is looking at positive parenting. We'll be looking at the new science of hope. And we're going to be talking about 2 life commodities next week. So we will be meeting on class for sure next week. And I will also bring all the handouts. As you can imagine, I have a ton of handouts today. I'll bring all of those handouts as well as the handouts for next week. Based on what we've covered today and based on what we're going to be doing next week, I will decide which 2 questions will be for the midterm. Also next week, given things that have happened in the world, I'm going to be offering you a final extra credit project that will take 2 weeks to do. It's totally voluntary, and it will take me about 20 minutes to describe this. River knows what it is. And so that what we'll be doing is I'll be giving you that extra credit opportunity. It will take you 2 weeks to do if you decide to do it. If you decide to do it from scratch all the way through, you will earn 50 bonus points. And most people in class need the 50 bonus points at this point. My apologies for all the weather. I just can't control some things. And so what we'll be doing, here's Aaron. What we'll be doing is finally catching up and then finally being back on speed on that. Okay. Ryan's here. Who's, I don't know who 17753 is. We don't know who that person is. So, hey, Aaron. Hey, Aaron. Aaron Ross. Hey, Aaron. He's working on it. He's amazing. He's amazing. Let me get him.
There he is.
There you go. How you doing?
Oh, good, Kubi. How are you?
Okay, good. What we're doing is recording this right now for the people who couldn't be here today. We've got one person drawn out of the country. A couple other people had business problems, and Valerie's just standing still in traffic. I have no idea what she's doing right now. And so I'm recording this, and the midterm again will be in 2 weeks from now. I will email everybody with a summary of everything we're talking about. Okay. What we're going to be doing today is both ends of the relationship spectrum. We're going to be starting out first with this concept I call aloneliness, looking at aloneness and loneliness and how this has just exploded since COVID lockdowns. Then we're going to go to the other end of the spectrum and look at positive relationships, and beyond that, looking at your primary relationships in your lives. A lot of the students who have taken this course, who were not in a primary relationship at the time, say that the stuff we covered in today's session is some of the most valuable thing in starting out a new primary relationship. I'll leave it to you as we go along. That makes sense? Oh, we've got a dog in there too. Okay. In about 2016, there was starting to be an explosion of research done on loneliness. And there was the insurance companies would start to do research on it. Psychiatrists were starting to do research on it. And some of them cited me because way back in 1975, 76, and 77, my doctoral dissertation was on how to counsel lonely people, which was the first one ever done with that. And I had to do a lot of convincing of my committee to allow me to do that kind of research. Since then, there's been a lot of research done. As you can imagine, what we've all gone through during COVID during the lockdown, that everybody felt more alienated, more isolated, indeed more alone. Back in the 70s, when I first named the topic, it was called Loneliness phenomenon, which was way too cumbersome. Since then, we've renamed it to Aloneliness. And part of this is neutral, part of it is good, and part of it is bad. And so what I want to talk to you a little bit about right now is the separations of all those and what said we're all on the same wavelength. This is research that was done, published in 2019, that was first seeing loneliness as a medical problem, as a psychiatric problem. And social scientist researchers define loneliness as an emotional state created when people have fewer social contacts and meaningful relationships. The Cigna Insurance Company did research of about 20,000 people, and they found out that about 47% said that they often feel alone or left out. Now, this is in 2019. Think about what you've been experiencing in COVID, since COVID. And right now, about 76% of all people have admitted that in the last 4 years, they have felt alienated or isolated or lonely. I call this, see if you can see this, seeing this as a loneliness. It's composed of three basic categories. As you can see on your left-hand side, there is loneliness. For me, loneliness is a resultant feeling that you've done something wrong, that the end result is that you're more lonely. You can see it is lonely in itself, but it also has two stepchildren of that. The first one is isolation, where you're physically isolated, as we were during COVID. And then the other one is alienation, where you have been separated from some kind of group. The alienation goes on face to face, but it also goes on online. There are so many people, young teenagers in high school, that are feeling alienated from their social groups. So loneliness is when you've done something wrong, that the result is that you are more separated from people in your life. Now, the center one is called aloneness. Aloneness is an existential concept that says, hey, we were all born alone, we will all die alone, and having to come up with our own understandings of aloneness is ways of coming to our understandings of about our uniqueness, our individuality. But we still go through alone, no matter how many loving people we have in our lives. When we are feeling by ourselves, we do feel alone. And that gives that notion of who we are as individuals. Over here on the right-hand section is what's called solitude. For me, solitude is a positive experience that you can control. I was reading your journals, and only about half of you did that experiment with disconnecting for a full week on that. It was just too scary for most folks. Most folks from the University of Maryland who did this first study about 9 years ago said that most college students could not disconnect totally for even one day. They started exhibiting symptoms of anxiety, of depression, of confusion, where they almost needed to be medicated on. There are times in our lives where we need to choose to be by ourselves, to recharge our batteries, to come to grips with ourselves. Those purpose statements you are working on are times that you need to be in solitude to start doing some of this reflecting and writing and editing about who I am, what am I all about, what's my purpose. So like a hydrogen atom, our aloneness is our neutron, our solitude is our proton, and our loneliness is our electron, and a couple electrons around it. Does that make sense? That it's almost at epidemic proportions now since we've come out of COVID. There are so many patients coming in to the emergency rooms or asking helping professionals that the underlying cause of a lot of their problems is that they are more alone and lonely and isolated and alienated than ever before. And so that it's having physical problems from this. In Japan, they found that more than 500,000 people spent at least 6 months alone at home with no outside contact. The U.S. Surgeon General at the time, Vivek Murthy, said that a lot of the core of a lot of people's emotional and physical problems was loneliness. We are social creatures. We need to be connected with people at different levels, whether it's classmates in here, whether it is work colleagues, whether it's family members, whether it's our lovers in our lives. And when some of those are disconnected by our own choice or by circumstances, the resultant feeling is that we feel more lonely. It's sometimes an ache in ourselves. There was some research just concluded from neuroscientists that say the pain of an emotional breakup of someone close to you is the same pain as you have as a physical injury or a physical illness. The brain cannot distinguish the pains from something physical versus something emotional. So if you do feel these pains, it is valid, and that's an indication that you are indeed lonely, that you need to start doing some things for yourself. In my research, I had to go back through history and looking at POWs and their forms of loneliness, Arctic explorers, people who were sick, and all of them had different routes to loneliness, and the results were still the same. It took a lot of belief in themselves and indeed positivity to say, let me start rebuilding my lives. Drug-dependent people, alcoholics, gamblers also have this senses of alienation and isolation, so that the result is that they do feel separated from their whole lives. Steve's coming in right now. And so when we're doing too much work on lumping them all together, we become confused. The basic things is to separate your loneliness from your existential aloneness, your individuality, your uniqueness, and the positive aspects of it when you need to be in solitude, when you need to choose to be in solitude. Does this make sense?
Yes, to me at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was Aaron Ross talking?
Yes.
Yeah. Aaron, you're
Yep.
unique among us. Tell us some circumstances when you felt alienated or isolated.
Well, when I, alienated, isolate, I really haven't, Kubi.
Oh, nice. That there's
Yeah.
circumstances.
I really haven't.
Great.
It's, as I tell everybody, as long as I've got the two M's, music and meals, I'm just fine.
That's well said. That's well said. We are social
Yeah.
creatures. We'll talk about that in a couple moments. That we need to have relationships. We need to have relationships that bring us joy, relationships that bring us understanding or meaning, as Aaron said, and relationships that bring us with a feeling of connection.
Yeah.
Now, that may not be a primary relationship, but that could certainly be a relationship where you feel connected with classmates or workmates or people at the gym, and people need to do that. When I was training hard at my gym in Reno, there was the same 20, 24 people there every morning. And we lived each other's lives so much, and we knew when they were going through the loss of a loved one or alienation from that, or been laid off from work, that we needed those kind of contacts in our lives. The important thing is to understand that we are all alone at different parts of our lives, and understanding your aloneness is the very direct way of understanding your uniqueness, your individuality, what makes you, you. I just finished off this book I was referring to, that over the last 6 weeks I've been writing. My family gave me for a Christmas present a online survey that had 101 essay questions called A Life Untold about myself. It turned out to be 52 pages. I'm full of myself, but I surprised myself how full I am on that. And we just sent it out to the publisher yesterday morning. And a lot of this stuff I have not thought about for years, or in a couple of cases, decades. And a lot of those pains of loneliness or alienation kind of popped back up in me. And I was surprised how the similar feelings just popped back up on that, as well as all the connections I had in different work settings, in different colleges or academic programs. And so we are social creatures, and we're creatures who seek meaning. And the more you can understand your essential relatability, aloneness, and choosing solitude, and you're better positioned to deal with your own loneliness. Remember, loneliness is a resultant feeling that you did something wrong, or the situations happened to you that you ended up feeling more lonely. You can do something about it. Don't let it deteriorate. Any kind of static feeling is not static. It either worsens or it becomes better. And if you do identify and accept that, hey, I am lonely, I need to do something, going out to a bar is not the answer. Going out gambling is not an answer. Yeah. Going out to have a one night stand, sorry, Steve, is not the answer. But there are things you can do to chip away at it. And no one thing you will do when you're lonely will overcome that totally, but you can chip away at that. The more you understand your own senses and separations between aloneness, loneliness, and solitude, the more you can have that be purposeful and meaningful for you on that. People matter in our lives. Relationships are learned skills. We were bad as kids in forming any kind of lasting relationships. We didn't know how. Do you remember the first time you were in puppy love, Valerie? She's swearing at me now. What we found out is that puppy love is valid. It's our first way of connecting with somebody that we're romantically interested in. And it is valid. Those almost always turn out to be a disaster. But they give us some serious indications of what we can do and how we can establish relationships. I've got shock for you that women are different from men. I don't know if you found that out. And part of that, I know, Valerie's shocked, that interestingly, from Christopher Peterson's book on Pursuing the Good Life in 2013, just before he passed away, he said that women interact face to face, whereas men interact side by side. Think about it. What's been happening with March Madness with basketball is that men were sitting in at someone's house or in a sports book doing things side by side.
Let me move.
Where women do things face to face. Women's friendship revolves around one another, whereas men's friendships revolve around shared activities. Steve, do you have a lot of bros at the gym?
I have many members and few bros, but yes, I do. And there's a camaraderie. And as you mentioned that you had a group of 25 in the morning.
Right.
It's interesting because there's all different groups based on different times. So you got the 4:30 a.m. morning group, then you got the 6:30 a.m. morning group, and the group fitness and the spin people. So it gets clicky, but it's an environment where I think everyone can bounce a few things off of each other, and that even if it's just a hey, how you doing?
Yes.
It means a lot to a lot of people.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, well said. Is that sometimes we just fall into like-minded groups, whether attending a college course or being at work or being at a gym. We fall into like-minded groups. And that is such a good way to start out some kinds of friendships. But men have different friendships than women, that men like to do things side by side. Hey, can you spot me here? Hey, I need some help here. Well, women will go out for coffee after they train. And so they do things face to face. Those are great generalizations of heterosexual men and women. Homosexual men and women are finding similar patterns. Homosexual men are seeing that they need to deal with things face to face instead of side by side. And some homosexual women are finding out that they need to do some things side by side and not always face to face. That our relationships are varied, and our ways of developing those relationships are unique to the situations. Let me share with you some brand new updated research just from February 7th of this year of 2023 about the oldest study, psychological study, is the Harvard study of adult development, which started out in the 1930s, where different students started following 700 men and their families throughout their entire lives. Just about all of them are dead now. So there's been follow-up studies of looking at their kids and second generations of them. And Wallinger and Schultz did the original work, and they created a book called The Good Life, Lessons from the World's Longest Scientific Study of Happiness. And there was one thing that those original 700 men did well, that their families, their next generations, are also learning about doing, and that's the quality of having close, meaningful relationships. If you learn how to have close, meaningful relationships, a lot of things take care of themselves, and you're indeed immune to physical ravages, to emotional ravages. Most important, good relationships, they keep us healthy and they keep us happy. In this latest research offerings from the Harvard study of adult development, they said there's 9 simple habits that can help you improve the quality of all levels of your relationships, whether it's with your dog or with your classmates. And here's the first one. Take stock of your relationships. Which relationships are important to you and which relationships may not be important to you? Number two is nurture casual relationships. They may not provide a great deal of meaning, but they do have some substance in your lives. When I taught the old human sexuality course, we would have students from each class connect with each other on a weekly or monthly basis for a year or a couple years afterwards. That those were casual relationships that they felt good about. In my public speaking courses, that we've had people that would connect on their own or go to someone else's speech to be a good supportive classmate in the audience. These casual relationships need to be nurtured. Yeah, they give a degree of meaning, but not as much as a family relationship or a primary love relationship. Here's some things that make time for conversations. The University of Kansas research said the simple act of reaching out for a conversation at least once a day increases people's happiness and lowers their stress levels. Even if it's an elevator conversation or a conversation with somebody at the gym or a conversation with somebody at a restaurant, reach out for those. Next one, number 4, should come as no surprise to you, is cultivate kindness. Research at Michigan State University looked through about 2,500 long-term married couples that have been together 20 years or more. And they found out that those people had higher levels of agreeableness and high emotional stability, and also reported greater levels of pure happiness. Number 5 implication of this was to volunteer. When you'll see next week, then we're talking about the extra credit project, and Steve knows what it is, that it has to do with something around volunteering. To develop better relationships, make time to volunteer. It is not old-fashioned or hokey. It does have impacts on you as much as what you do for others. Number 6 is learn how to apologize. When was the last time you sincerely apologized instead of saying, my bad, and dismissing it? Learn how to apologize. It is an opportunity for you to connect or reconnect with somebody. We all make mistakes. We're all human. 7 is ask questions. We all like talking about ourselves. But if you learn how to be a good interviewer by asking mostly open-ended questions that start out with the words what or how, then we learn how to have a meaningful dialogue with people from which relationships may develop. Express your love. There are many ways to love and many ways to express it. So particularly with family members, immediate family members, distant family members, as well as the most important people in your lives, your kids and your lovers, share different ways to say love. And finally, they said is learn how to be vulnerable and feel vulnerable, especially with those people closest to you. Those are little doors that open up for us. I did the human sexuality course here at Western Nevada College for about 9 years. And each time I offered it, and I had not planned this, of course, each time I offered it, and I was offering it 3 times during the school year, I would have each class create their own volume of a guide to intimacy. And we had 28 volumes of a guide to intimacy. What I will be doing next week is bringing 4 of these volumes. When we ended the course in 2012? Yeah, in 2012. Our last volume of the Guide to Intimacy was The Last Dance. I had one student who counted up all the individual hints and perspectives from the previous 27 volumes and we came up with 505 different hints. So intimacy is quite broad in terms of perspectives or tactics or techniques. So in volume 28, I came up with a little summary of it that said about 95 or 96% of all the ideas in the 27 volumes of the Guide to Intimacy are positive things to do. Very rarely did I include a thing to avoid or not do. Here's something that I'll keep on, I'm introducing it now, but I will keep on repeating it over the next 3 or 4 weeks. And that is this: the compliment to somebody, even a stranger, can do wonders. Learn how to give a compliment, overcome your reluctances to compliment or your suspicions of being complimented. Many people don't receive compliments well. They say, "Oh, shucks," or "you didn't mean that." That learning how to receive a compliment is as important as learning how to give an honest, direct, sincere compliment, either to a coworker, to somebody at the gym, to a stranger. I was at our Arby's today, and the manager served me, and she had a Patagonia top on. I said, "Nice Patagonia," and this made her day in the midst of the lunch rush. That the compliments, the simplest compliment to make is to say the 2 words, "Thank you." Thank you for helping me. Thank you for being there. Thank you for going the extra distance. That's the simplest compliment to give. Sometimes we can compliment somebody on their consistency. "Hey, thanks for always being there." Or for a coworker saying, "Thanks for having my back." You don't have to be a police officer or a firefighter or another first responder that needs to rely on their workmates. We can be there for people. Here's another thing about the trends from the Guide to Intimacy. Beyond everything else, be kind, be nice, and be polite to each other. I cannot tell you how many times when I was a marriage therapist that I would have couples come in who just were disgusted with each other, who hated each other. And the simplest first step was just to be polite to each other again, as if they were dating for the first time. And how that just lifted up the burdens off of their shoulders. Always remember and share what originally attracted you to your lover, and tell them those things. "Hey, the first time I sat and talked with you, I couldn't believe that you were interested in me." Or the first time I got to know you at a dinner, I was just amazed how caring and giving you were. Get back to those initial things that attracted you. Listening is the most direct way of showing you care about somebody. Listening with your ears, but also listening with your heart and your head. Listen to people. Here's one of the negatives to avoid, and that is this: never, never, ever make fun of your partner in front of family or friends. A lot of times people feed off of that, and you may get a joke, but you've distanced yourself from your partner. Part of being a united front with your intimate partner is when you're around close family members on both sides of the family, and avoid the temptation of making fun of them. All of us make mistakes. So when your partner makes a mistake, understand, accept, forgive them, and then go on. All of us are human. We all make mistakes. Sometimes the mistakes are more longer term, and we have to be more supporting of that. Being around our partners all the time. It takes a while to shift into being intimate with partners. And part of that is you have to commit yourself to intimacy, from communication to sensuality, giving them a foot rub, to all the way to sexuality. Which gets back to this old notion you've heard of, but we have to keep on remembering: making love is not the same as having sex. making love is much more different than having sex. Also, believe that there are always some new beginnings. Cherish your new opportunities to help you grow closer. And finally, the last theme of this is create an enduring love affair. Keep on being romantic. You'll see next week, I'll give you some other guides to intimacy about it. We have one that I'll share with you about how to reignite your relationship, which are some things that if you sometimes our routines become ruts and those ruts become crevasses. So we did some research in the class, one of those classes back in 2011 on how to reignite your relationship. We also had in volume 26, we had an intimacy assessment that people have made copies of and do this by themselves or with their partner a couple times a year. And sometimes we take people for granted in our lives or take situations for granted in our lives. Here's some scary stuff that you'll see. I'll be referring to him as we go along, a fellow up in the University of Washington called John Gottman. For the last 45 years, he has studied what makes successful married couples that way. And he has created a research technique. He and his graduate students have created a research technique called thin slicing. That, like thin slicing for biology, making a slide for the microscope, they have learned to ask simple, direct questions, and they can, with great deal of certainty, find out from what people say to these questions and how they say it, how long that marriage will last with 93% accuracy. In 2013, Gottman found out that in one of his recent studies, young professional couples on the average spent only about 35 minutes per week talking with their partner. 35 minutes a week talking with their partner. Whereas that our ability to respond enthusiastically to good news is important, but also Gottman found out that couples who grow together spend about 5+ hours per week not working, but talking and listening and communing with folks. Back in 2012, when I lived in Reno, I lived in a little compound of two other houses, and I was the only one without a washer and dryer. I was living in a little barn at the time. And so I would go down to the local laundromat the same time early on Tuesday mornings, and there was the same old couple there with me called Beverly and Mac. And they, at that point in 2012, they had been married for 55 years, and they had heard of me. And so we start talking on these Tuesday mornings about relationships, what they see wrong with kids' relationships. And then I started asking them about, how did you two make it 55 years together? They looked at each other and laughed, and they immediately said three things. They said, first, there's always adjustments to make. You'll see that, particularly if one of you is going to school and the other one isn't, is that, you're not parallel all the time. One of you will branch out. One of you will slow down. Sometimes people will take tangents. There are always adjustments to make. Hopefully you have a good core there to handle those adjustments. Then they said, give each other space. You can't be side by side with them all the time. Give each other space. And thirdly, they said, as they were doing it, they said, laugh. Laugh together, laugh with each other, not at each other, but laugh with each other. And they were started finding out that the more they laughed, this lightened the burdens and the loads of everything. And Mac died shortly after they talked about it, and Beverly talked to me over a period of years until she passed away. Okay, but those are some of the greatest things. There was a Jewish rabbi by the name of Marvin Levine, and he called in a primary relationship, he called it the 60-40 rule. And I thought, no, the first time I saw that, I said, wait a minute, it's 50-50, putting in energy together. And he said, no, it's not half people's coming
No,
together.
I've moved into the bedroom if you need me.
It's two whole people coming together to make something more. It's not being dependent nor independent. It's learning how to become interdependent, which is the best of both worlds. And Marvin Levine came up with this notion called the 60-40 rule. It said it doesn't mean that you always have to give 50% effort. How about at certain circumstances, you give 60% or 70% effort? And people will feel that you're all contributing, that we all have each other's back on that. All right, let me see if I have this, the share screen. We'll see if this is, can you see that?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, thank you. From his book in 2021, Gary Lewandowski came up with, based on his research, the 10 pillars of a strong relationship. You know you're in a good, strong relationship when you can just feel free to be yourself. You don't have to put up any masks or any airs or play any games, that you are indeed your own best friends forever. You feel comfortable and close. And the more comfortable you feel, the closer you will be. Interestingly, and this is a switch from the research from 20 years ago, that you feel more alike than different. Have you ever heard this phrase that opposites attract? They may attract, but they don't stay together. Have you ever known a couple that it was always arguing things, being very passionate about things, would argue and then be very passionate about their lovemaking? Those relationships don't make it. You feel like you're a team, a unified front, especially when you have kids together. They make you a better person just by being there. You share the power of the decision-making, the planning, and the resolving. They're all fundamentally good. All of us are pieces of work. You implicitly trust each other, and you don't have any serious issues. One of the biggest changes that when I was a marriage therapist, that they said, what was the key to a successful long-term relationship? And we believed it was how well you argued. How well would you call fair fighting, or handling different types of situations? They said that how well you argued was a microcosm of your overall communication. And we found out just in the last 9 or 10 years or so, that was wrong. I take pride, and I may share it with you next week. I came up with the greatest handout ever on constructive arguing. What did I call it back then? I called it constructive couples communication. It was a great one, but it's invalid. When I would see couples, they were in the midst of a crisis, and a lot of times they should have come and seen me, weeks or months before that. And through a lot of hard work on their part, they would get to the point where they resolved things, but that's when they stopped coming to see me. The problem's over. And I said, no, you're at a point now where you can start improving the relationship. When I was in private practice with Jerry Marshall, Martha Nims, Martha had an interesting phrase. She said, when relationships are going great, sex only contributes 15% of it, what's going great. And she said, when relationships are going badly, is that sex is 85% of the problem. So it's putting maybe too much emphasis on sex. sometimes we
Wow.
have to learn how to build on our strengths. And what I'm going to share with you now are what I call and I've teased you with this. I shared with you the big 5 things you've never probably heard about successful marriages. It's been research done, and I don't know if you know who these people are. You ever heard of Phil Donahue and Marlo Thomas? They've been a long time married couple, and they wrote a book last year, What Makes Marriages Last, of 40 celebrity couples. This is a 600-page book, and they had all sorts of things that how make marriages last. And there's no one formula that you have to follow things from A to B to C to D on this. But they said a lot of times it's how we communicate. And one of the saddest things I hear of people like River's age or Kristen's age is that a lot of people in their younger generation now think that they'll have 3 marriages in their lifetimes. The first marriage, they say, is the marriage of convenience because they're supposed to be married, knowing that that won't last. They call it a starter marriage or a tryout marriage, knowing that will fail. Well, if you've ever been divorced, it's one of the most emotionally racking times of your life. And I don't recommend that to anybody. Then they say the second marriage is for status, for income, for stability. And those don't last either. And they say maybe the third marriage in their 40s or 50s is with true soulmate, a true friend. A lot of people who are married after you ever heard of the 7-year itch? That you become bored with the person after 5 to 6 or 7 years. And especially with heterosexual males, they have to understand that there is not the passion in a marriage after 6 or 7 years as there was at the beginning when you were ripping off each other's clothes 5 times a day. It turns out to be from a passionate marriage to a companionship marriage, that you and your partner are companions on that. Here's one no I found out. That if you ever cheat, the relationship is over. Because you're cheating not so much on your partner, you're cheating on your relationship. Now, there's some partners who have had the courage to forgive each other, to work through anger issues and create a new relationship. But if there has been any kind of cheating, there's no going back to where you were before the cheating, because you've cheated on the marriage, cheated on the relationship. A lot of my friends have been married now from 40 to 50 years. And a lot of them keep on going strong. And a couple of them say, we've been married 42 years and we've never had a fight. And being around them, I know that's true because they respect each other too much. How many times have you had a fight with your partner only afterwards to say, we didn't need to fight about that? That was just stupid. When I was a marriage therapist, I would have in my desk drawer in my office tubes of toothpaste. Because a lot of times they would say the root cause of our problems is that he squeezes the toothpaste in the middle of it, and I wanted to roll it up from the bottom. So I would pull out the drawer and give them each their own tube of toothpaste. See, problem solved. Now, what else are we talking about? So there are 5 things I've come up with over the years that are maybe secrets, maybe said in some ways before. But I'm starting to do marriage ceremonies again. And I did a couple during the early days of COVID, and I said, no, this is too risky. So I started doing some Zoom sessions on marriages, and that kind of petered out. And so I'm starting to do some marriages again. And what I do when I do a wedding ceremony, I sit down with the couple about a month beforehand to outline what kind of ceremony do they want. Are they going to be reciting their vows to each other? Are they going to be sharing some things. And sometimes I'll ask them some questions about what did you first think of them when you first met? How did each of you grow together? And I'll bring those things up during the ceremony. And a couple of the things that come out that I share with them about it is you've got to be, as it was said before, you have to be your best friends. If you just fall head over heels romantically with a person, those relationships do not last, no matter how good the sex is. That those don't last. The best connecting, passionate, and companionate marriages start out as friends. And that should be a relief for some people saying, well, I've got to put the moves on somebody. I never knew what that meant. But people say I put the moves on them like it was a chess piece. Being friends with people, with groups of people, sometimes you become a friend with some person that some attraction grows from that. Here I'm dating myself now. Valerie, Steve, help me out here. How many of you ever heard of the great actor called Jimmy Stewart? Thank you, Steve. He was a great.
I have, Kubi.
Thank you, Aaron. He was
Yes.
a legend in it, and he did so many things. You'll see him every Christmas with the Christmas movies, and he did a movie called Shenandoah, which was during the Civil War. He was a Southern farmer that had 3 sons and a daughter, and the 3 sons went off to war. And there was a soldier who fell in love with his daughter. And the guy was asking Jimmy Stewart for his permission to give her hand in marriage. And Jimmy Stewart, in his own way, said, I know you love her, but do you like her? And that threw the kid off for a moment. You got to like those people. Like them for who they are, like them for their own foibles and their mistakes, their uniquenesses. Do you like them? Can you be best friends with them? From there is that trust comes, mutual respect comes. It just genuinely enjoying each other's company comes. That good romances evolve from these friendships. Just should come as no surprise to you. Number 2, that successful primary relationships, I call them marriages, but sometimes you live together for years, and essentially you're married. There is a core of positivity, both in terms of attitudes toward each other and the feelings associated with it, that both of you grow through the relationship, both of you complement each other, both of you reinforce each other. Remember, we were talking about the 3-to-1 ratio? About your own positivity. There's been research done that says in successful marriages, it's not so much 3-to-1 ratio, it's 5-to-1 ratio. Can you be mutually supportive of each other? There was Robert Weiss came up with a statement called positive sentiment override, PSO, he called it. That you always, no matter how distant you feel, this positive sentiment, positive feeling override gets you back to saying, we're together, we like each other, we're friends with that. So part of this is focusing on what she or he does well, focusing on what both of you do well together, and hopefully communication's high in there. That the higher set point you have for this positivity, 5-to-1 ratio, the more ensures that there will be good times and the bad times will be a lot less severe. Along with this is making time for each other, complimenting each other, hugging each other, that you're going side by side with them, presenting this unified front. Here's a little secret in this 3rd one about supporting each other, bouncing back together. And here it is. It's celebrating. Celebrate together little victories, not huge victories, but when one of you has a little good grade from a course or a good result from school, celebrate that. I mean, jump up and down and yell. that these little celebrations keep this 5-to-1 ratio going. That you'll find out that you stop worrying about the differences and start realizing that you're both this united front. You're living your commitments together. Along with that, then, is that you're grateful for the other and you share that gratitude toward others. These are little celebrations in their own way. Our fourth factor people don't know about is what we've been talking about, is about pure intimacy, of that there is a we-ness, there is a togetherness from that, where there is an interdependence. Yeah, we are 200% individuals coming together to become more. Each of us has our own strengths. Each of us keeps on developing ourselves as individuals, but through this relationship, we become interdependent. We know when when you need the other, or when the other one needs you. The last one is one of the things I ask people during these planning ceremonies for the wedding. You know, when we talk about what readings do you want me to read, or there's a poem you want me to read, or a prayer to go through, we talk about that. But then I ask them a question: are you devoted to each other? Devotion is much more than a commitment. Devotion is much more than a priority. Devoted is throwing your whole energies into that person, into the relationship. Devotion is almost spiritual after a while. So we're starting out with being friends, and we go to the other extreme of being devoted to that person. You'll make any kind of sacrifice for them.
All right.
Because you're making any kind of sacrifice for the relationship. So these 5 things, most people haven't heard about these, but are you friends with them? Can you trust them? Can you support them? The core is, again, positive feelings, positive thoughts, that you're growing together. There is a Japanese word.
Want me to get the deadbolt?
There's a Japanese word called amai, A-M-A-I, which is translated to being cherished. Do you cherish that person beyond the positivity? Can you keep that 5-to-1 ratio going on it? Learn how to compliment each other, stand by each other's side, support each other, be grateful and share that gratitude. Fourthly, learning how to be intimate without necessarily leading to lovemaking. I had one couple tell me from the old human sexuality course that every night, no matter what kind of day they had, they held feet in bed. I said, what? Held feet? They said, yep, we didn't necessarily need to touch each other or hug each other or hold hands, but we touched feet together. They said that we were grounded them. We were all together. At the end of the day, they touched feet with each other in bed. And then the fifth one, again, is beyond a priority. Are you devoted to that person? Now, if 3 or 4 or all 5 of these things go, you're in a great position to have a good, long-lasting, successful relationship. Is this making sense? Good thing Valerie's not counting.
Yeah, Kubi, that's.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Oh,
go ahead, Aaron.
That was interesting. You said that was interesting. You said that was unusual.
Yeah. Some of these you haven't heard before or heard in those ways, especially about devotion or different kinds of celebrations. I'll tell a story about my wife. She's probably listening on the other side of the door. But she struggled through life as a single mom with 3 kids that each had their own physical problems, and took her 10 years to get through UNR with her bachelor's degree. And that's when I was just coming into the picture about 9-10 years ago. And she got a letter from the University of Nevada saying, congratulations, during your graduation, you will be one of those as earned academic honors. And she didn't know. She had a straight 4.0 average. And so she earned academic honors. So we had to talk about what that meant. And she was so involved with each one of her classes, even though she got all A's in all her classes, she was so working on the classes and balancing her life with her kids that she wasn't going for the honors. She was going for learning the material and finishing. There was one of my friends once said, love is a hell of a lot of work, but it's also a hell of a lot of fun. And it's a lot of being connected, putting up this united front when you're together in front of family members, and especially when you have kids, that learning how to have a positive connection there. Okay, let me see if I can go back to this. I'm 1 for 1 so far in screen shares. Let's see if I can do this one. This is one I just can't. Oops, wrong one. Sorry. This is one I came up with just recently. This is called little gestures. When we talk about, no, it's the wrong one again. I'll catch it here. Oops, let me see here. There we go. Can you see the small gestures? Small gestures women wish men did more in heterosexual relationships. And this was from BuzzFeed, the survey from 2021. And it was just interesting things. And if you can read that, you can go through some of these things and see where you can start doing more of that, whether it's putting your phones away, using little gifts, hugging once a day at least. It is magical sometimes. The guys have to learn how to be better listeners and not fixers of things. Instead of complimenting a woman on her looks, anything physical, give her a compliment about proud of her personality. It goes farther than you think. I had one woman said, "Give me a hug and a forehead kiss instead of a goodbye." Introduce them to friends immediately. Use handwritten notes, love letters and notes. One woman said, "I think all guys should know the power of the wink." I never thought of that before. Winking is so attractive, she said, if it's smooth enough. Do good night and good morning texts if you're apart. Use a little massage when you're sitting on a chair, just little gestures like that. Respect my opinions, the women say, about sports instead of gatekeeping or mansplaining it to me. Here's an old-fashioned one. Kissing my hand, one woman said. It's so underrated, and it gives me jelly legs. I didn't know that. They said once she starts sleeping over, have a trash can in her bathroom and keep a pack of pads or tampons there. Shows that you care about the little things. And finally, call out your friends. That's where lives are changed. Get away from the bro culture and make sure that the woman you're developing this relationship with feels pride and valued. You'll see next week when we meet together, I will give you all sorts of handouts, of course, on our guides to intimacy. And some of these things are little techniques. Some of these things are big picture perspectives to have. But intimacy means you're thinking about being intimate all the time. Intimacy means you're going out of your way to do the extra things, and it does pay off. These 5 things I shared with you, you may have other words for them, but always get back to that positive sentiment override. During the tough times, go back to she's a wonderful person or he means well. So go back to these things and learn how to give compliments, sincere compliments. Learn how to be grateful and share about what you're grateful for, and learn how to be devoted. And devotion can be nonverbal. Sitting side by side with her in the emergency room, when their kid is sick, being a great supporter of what he's doing, even though you could care less about it, but you are there about it. You compete in shows anymore, Steve? No, you're a businessman now.
And the thing is, Coob, it just it takes a lot on your body, and then to get to that level, you have to take it one more step up, and that next notch is just as we talk about relationships, it's really something where I've filled that with my significant other, Shelly, and that there's no more time in my, I have to really prioritize the time I have. And to add that to my plate, or to add anything else at this point besides school, work, and home, is really stressful on my relationship.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Because we change at different paces and we grow at different rates and we go in different directions. But at the end of the day, at the end of the month, you're always coming back together. That's part of that support. Is if they're supporting you going back to school, that's great. Or they're learning something new, you got to support them. That's part of this unified front. A lot of this stuff I've been mentioning may be common sense, but it is not common practice. There are many things to do and a few things not to do. Don't make fun of them in public. Never have an affair, because you're giving up on the relationship as well. I've seen maybe a dozen couples who have had an affair or both had affairs that had the courage and the honesty to work through the anger and create a new relationship, not going back to the old relationship. That causes so much work. But stay away from this notion of a starter marriage or a status marriage. Go into it for the right reasons and follow those 5 things. This stuff making sense? That's a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, next week in class, I'll bring handouts for that. And we're going to talk about positive parenting next week. We're going to talk about this whole new science of hope, which has just been remarkable in the last 3 years. And we'll talk about 2 life commodities. And then I'll also present next week to you the extra credit opportunity that will take 2 weeks to do. And it's completely voluntary to do that. So that's what we're doing next week. Come hell or high water, we're going to be back in class together. Okay? Valerie, we'll see you tomorrow in class. She's in the writing class. Okay? We shall see you next week. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, QB.
Thank you,
Thank
Aaron.
you so much. Have a nice day.
We'll see you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, Aaron.
Thank you.
See you, Aaron.
Thank you. See you, QB. See you.
I don't know who
All right.
17753 is, but see ya.
Hello, it's me,
Who's
Eddie.
me?
Eddie.
Oh, Eddie. Oh, good to see you.
Right. See ya.
See you, Kristen. See you, Aaron Ross.
See you, QB.
All right. Valerie, you frozen.